there's been a real paradigm shift in the study of Alzheimer's disease. Over the last 10 to 15 years, we've come to appreciate that inflammation or dysregulated immune responses is a key player in Alzheimer's disease. There's a really strong correlation between inflammation and activation of, in particular, these one cell called microglia. The other big breakthrough has been our genetic studies of people that have passed away from Alzheimer's disease, especially the late onset form. We know that a lot of the genetic risk factors that are associated with having a higher prevalence of developing Alzheimer's. Before, most people were just thinking of neurons, 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 because they're the ones that are regulating our memory and our motion, and they're the ones that are lost. But the actual culprit appears to be a bunch of other cells that haven't been studied.
So, what if a breakthrough was made in the battle with a chronic degenerative disease that doesn't claim the lives directly of millions of Americans, but renders them with decades of healthy life incapacitated? You'd say it'd be a pretty big deal, right? Well, that's what's happened at the University of Virginia. Perhaps the very first step in what seems like a half-century long journey into understanding dementia and costing, I think right now, I just saw a number, 7 million Americans, their lifestyles, and already having consumed $8.3 billion worth of research money to get to this point. Dr. John Lukens from the University of Virginia, where they made this breakthrough, is on with us. Doctor, thank you so much, first and foremost, for what you've done, but thanks for joining us as well.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's great to be here.
I'm
Excited
sure
to speak to you.
CNN, Dr. Gupta, and the Today Show, everyone else is lining up behind us here.
Yeah.
I say that with my tongue in cheek. Unfortunately, these are the kind of seminal things that I feel bad about my brothers and sisters in the media, because it doesn't seem like we pay as much attention to them as,
Yeah.
and you would think, given the news coverage over President Biden's perhaps loss of mental acuity
Mhm.
over time, this would fit right into that story as, hey, here's a way we might be able to beat it. My journey with Alzheimer's, working with several fundraising groups going back to
Mhm.
1999. And I remember in 1999, I was hosting an event for what was then called the Memory Walk, now the Walk to End
Uh-huh.
Alzheimer's.
Yep.
And I think we must have spent three-quarters of our on-air time explaining what Alzheimer's was. Now it's getting close to the point where every single person watching or listening to this has somebody in their world that is suffering at some point of dementia. That's not overstating it, is it, John?
No, I don't think so at all. I think we've gotten better at diagnosing it with imaging.
Hmm.
And then the other facet is that people are living a lot longer thanks to breakthroughs that have happened decades ago in the treatment of cardiovascular disease with, statins and preventing heart attacks. And then also, we've made major breakthroughs in the treatment of cancers, both
Yeah.
with immunotherapies. So people are living longer, and that's contributing to it at some level. But that being said, we also know that neurodegenerative diseases as a whole are going up. Things like ALS, which comes on a lot earlier than AD in most cases, not all the time, and multiple sclerosis prevalence is up too. So there's also some other potentially environmental factors that are contributing to that too.
Well, that's interesting because I believe we just passed Lou Gehrig Day,
Hmm.
which commemorates obviously one of the most famous battles with or defeats to the hand of ALS
Yeah.
over time. And we have dear friends of the program who are battling it right now. And it seems like more and more people are finding this. So tell us what you discovered, because the arc, if I remember it correctly, is
Mhm.
a decade, maybe a little bit more ago. Folks like you were able to examine the human brain pre-mortem. Prior to
Yeah.
that, the only way to really look at somebody who was suffering Alzheimer's was after they had passed away, and then kind of look at what was going on in there. And the ability to kind of watch this develop over some time in clinical trials and everything, it must have been a sea change for researchers like yourself.
Yeah, there's been a real paradigm shift in the study of Alzheimer's disease in that over the last 10 to 15 years, we've come to appreciate that inflammation or dysregulated immune responses is a key player in Alzheimer's disease. And there's been two major kind of areas of study that have led to that. One of them is neuroimaging of humans, um, basically during life, and using various dyes to look at immune activation in the brain. And we know that there's a really strong correlation between inflammation and activation of, in particular, these one cell called microglia, and the incidence and progression of Alzheimer's disease. And that the other big breakthrough has been our genetic studies of people that have passed away from Alzheimer's disease, especially the late onset form. And from those studies, which are relatively new, in addition, we know that a lot of the genetic risk factors that are associated with having a higher prevalence of developing Alzheimer's, many of those genes are almost exclusively expressed by immune cells. So this has been a kind of a paradigm shift in the sense that before, most people were just thinking of neurons, because they're the ones that are regulating our memory and our motion, and they're the ones that are lost. But the actual culprit appears to be a bunch of other cells that haven't been studied. I think that provides hope for people that are dealing with this or have family members that it's affecting them. This avenue of studying the immune response hasn't been explored in great detail in comparison to what's gone on before.
As a neuroscientific researcher, I'm going to go down a tangent because you said something
Okay.
about immuno triggers that
Hmm.
I think must make your job that much harder because you can't just go point A, point B. You might have family members all with the same genetic marker, and some of them
Hmm.
develop Alzheimer's and some not. Um,
Yeah.
and what was it? So, one of the things after the scanning and technology came along was the discovery of these plaque buildups and the
Yeah. Hmm.
tau tangles and the plaque buildup. And over the time, I've watched the story go from, well, the plaque is causing it, from that to, well, what's causing the plaque? And what's,
Yeah.
what's making this plaque buildup? Discovering that it's really somewhat of a defense mechanism inside the brain. So here we are. What did you guys discover, and how did you get there? I understand it was done using mice in a lab situation.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So our lab and hundreds of others around the world are using animal models, which have enormous power in the sense that you can study the whole organism.
Mhm.
When you try to do things in a dish, you can't evaluate crosstalk between the brain and the periphery, or you can't really incorporate all the cells that are um, driving the disease. So basically, these some of these models that we use have mutations that we've identified in patients that have Alzheimer's disease. So one of the ones that we use have five separate mutations that are individuals that have succumbed to Alzheimer's in the past have been genetically modified to make it a better model of human disease. And
Mhm.
um, we were predominantly starting this project thinking about aging. So aging is the greatest risk factor for developing Alzheimer's disease and most other neurodegenerative diseases by far. And it's still a little, although there's some ideas out there of why that is, it's still not definitive in terms of our understanding. So we know a lot about aging outside the brain. And one of the things that drives aging outside the brains is as we age, our telomeres get smaller and they kind of protect our DNA. And as a result, we get more and more DNA damage. And when that DNA damage can't be repaired or removed, what you have is cancer develop. But in addition to that's kind of the end stage, but in between then and there, you can have your immune response get activated to that DNA damage, and that seems to be a major driver of global inflammation as we age in all tissue, and then the loss and dysfunction of that tissue. So we were interested in that in the brain, and what we identified is this molecule called STING, which, when it gets activated in response to DNA damage, it starts to produce these inflammatory mediators, the same ones that are produced during a severe viral infection. And this can cause damage to the brain, and this causes memory impairments. And it's similar to, if you're sick and your memory is not working quite as well because you're feeling under the weather.
Mhm.
Um, in a similar way, this cytokine kind of response in the brain can do something similar, in addition to killing the neuron.
Well, yeah, it's that fog that you feel that,
Hmm.
just you feel like your head's swollen. And
Yeah.
I usually just blame it on my sinuses, but I know that there's something else going on there. So immunoresponses, this is
Uh-huh.
always fascinating because these are our body doing what
Yeah.
thinks is needed to protect itself.
Yeah.
So what is it thinking that's happening that it's trying to defend against that's
Uh-huh.
actually causing it to damage itself?
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. So in evolutionarily, like these defense molecules like Sting they were thought to arise to help protect us against pathogens.
Hmm.
So DNA, like our DNA, which controls what cell is what, and the, it's protected in the nucleus. However, if you get DNA damage that occurs, it leaks out into the cytosol, where you have all these immune sensors that are patrolling and trying to ring the alarm if they sense there's either stress or there's infection. So
Okay.
what happens is when viruses and bacteria are taken up by our cells, a lot of times their DNA will leak out into the cytosol. And this is where these molecules like Sting are patrolling. And if they see DNA that's in the cytosol, they know that that's either an infection or a sign of cellular stress, and they can become activated. So while it's obviously good in the context of preventing, a viral infection or bacterial infection, it can get triggered as we age, and DNA damage starts to develop over time.
Is there, are there, I guess is the better question,
Yeah.
lifestyle things that we can be doing in our young years
Mhm.
to forestall? I guess the DNA damage is really the thing we want to be forestalling the best. I know the expression was always heart healthy is brain healthy, which
Yeah.
seemed to go along with the idea that these plaque buildups were defensive. So, first and foremost, before I ask you the $100 million
Yeah.
question,
Yeah.
when is the cure coming?
Yeah.
Preventatively for right now, what should people who are pre-Alzheimer's, and knock wood, never going to be Alzheimer's patients, but what should they be doing nutritionally, activity-wise, to try to prevent this kind of stuff from happening?
Yeah. So I think the ultimate the ultimate area of improvement in terms of retaining brain health over time is sleep, and consistent sleep that's
Well, now I'm in
unfragmented.
trouble. Now I'm in
Yeah, as am I. But so what happens when we sleep is that we have this brain drainage pathway that help to remove all the garbage, the metabolic garbage that develops over the course of our day. The
really.
brain, yeah. So the brain is creating tons of metabolites. It's highly biologically active all day,
Hmm.
and just like your car needs an oil change, your brain also needs somewhat of an oil change. And the oil of the brain is called the CSF. So it's this kind of liquid that is always flushing our brain and kind of clearing it out. And actually, the brain drainage pathway was also discovered at UVA almost 10 years ago by Yoni Kipnis. He's actually going to be here this weekend giving a talk, which everybody's excited to see him again. But
Yeah, even I
that,
knew that name.
yeah, yeah, Yoni's a legend. But so that happens at night. Basically, those pathways get revved up, and you just have massive cleansing and things like amyloid and tau,
I had
or
no idea that all this was going on. I thought it was all just downloading memories and having, precognitional, dreams or something like that. So all
Yeah,
this is biologically going on, cleaning out the brain from all the day. I mean, I've seen the
yeah,
neuroscans that show the heat that a brain generates
yeah,
in the course of the day. So I can only imagine that. I guess that only makes sense to me. I just had no idea.
yeah. Yeah, and there's also, I mean, that's one of the components. There's other things that are happening too. You get a lot of antioxidants being produced late at night, so like bringing down all those reactive oxygen species that develop during the day. And then the next one, and they've shown these all with, various imaging techniques and various different animal models. You also get repair of that TNA. So there's multiple things that are going on as we sleep that helps to kind of reset the whole system to improve and kind of return things to homeostasis to where things are operating the best they can.
So is
So that's
you know,
go ahead.
is sleeping 4 hours and 4 hours the same as sleeping 8 hours straight? I ask, probably afraid that I know the answer.
No, I mean, so everybody's different. There are some what I like to call mutants out there that and some of them are in my field. Yoni might be one of them that only appear to need 4 hours of sleep, and that might have something to do with some of their genetics. They might have better you know brain cleansing or
Yeah.
yeah, or DNA damage repair stuff. But I think in everybody is different and it differs depending on your age. But I guess somewhere between 6 and 8 is probably where to aim. There are
Is there a
benefits.
feeling like, I mean, if the alarm goes off and it's, oh, is that a warning sign that you haven't completely, slept through your cleansing cycle? Is that requirement that coffee already be brewing before you get out of bed? I know I
Yeah,
sound like I'm being glib, but
yeah,
these are
yeah,
things, I want people to go walk away and say, well, if I get an extra hour's sleep, even if it means going to bed earlier, and I'm going to do so much more
mhm,
help to myself. I mean, that's we're all trying to get 20-minute walks in every day. I mean, maybe
yeah.
a little bit more sleep at night.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is those 4 hours of like unfragmented sleep. If you could get two of those cycles, then that's optimal.
Okay.
That's we're all guilty of hitting the snooze, and that's not so big of a deal. But
But
yeah, and then
chronically, you're talking about somebody who never really gets a good night's sleep. That's where it starts to become a problem.
yeah, yeah, and the other big thing, and you kind of alluded to it, is exercise. Exercise is huge,
Hmm.
and you get better circulation of the brain, you get better cleansing. It's that data, sleep, and that data of exercise and the benefits of it on improving cognition are just it's undisputed in the field.
Okay.
So
So now you've identified this sting molecule.
uh-huh.
Where does that lead? I mean, and I know we're coming up on the longest day for our friends in the Alzheimer's Association.
Yeah,
Our listeners still live in areas where the ride to end Alzheimer's, the bike tour, is still coming up.
yeah,
And certainly the walk to end Alzheimer's in the autumn, where one of these days I'd like to live long enough to see somebody carrying a white flower, which is indicative of somebody who is beaten
yeah.
disease. What is the next step now that you've identified this sting molecule? And when does Pfizer get it so we can get a cure? I know, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead
Yeah,
here.
yeah, no, no, no. I mean, so there's a lot of interest in targeting Sting, and that's existed for a couple years now. And just because we've known that Sting and the pathways downstream of it cause inflammation
Mhm.
and kind of deterioration of organs. So
Oh, so
that,
even beyond the brain, like the inflammation
yeah,
of your blood vessels that lead to plaque buildups there, or that lead to heart
yeah,
attacks. Okay, all right. So
yeah,
this is a
yeah.
good guy that's turned bad. It's like Clint Eastwood in our little movie inside of us.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, there are some obvious global benefits of targeting it. And Just to go back to an earlier point, you mentioned that somebody close to the program, is being affected by ALS.
Mhm.
This thing pathway has also been implicated now in the literature in ALS and also Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis. So it seems to be
Wow.
somewhat of a shared pathway that seems to be contributing
Okay.
globally to neuroinflammatory and neurodegenerative diseases. But yeah, so we're obviously doing some more mechanistic work to kind of pinpoint the specific cells and downstream pathways that it's using, so we can really fine tune it because you know, eventually we're probably going to want something that only affects it partially, so we don't lose the beneficial effects of it in terms
Right.
of infection.
Hmm.
Um, I think with this growing body of evidence that the immune response to DNA damage is a culprit in neurodegenerative diseases, this thing isn't the only pathway that's activated. And that's the thing about the immune system. There's various different sensors that exist, and there's always this arms race because bugs are mutating and they're developing inhibitors to limit our immune response. So there are various other sensors that are also being either have been recently identified or starting to be identified. So continuing to kind of pursue other novel targets because some compound or some molecules are easier to target than others and have better safety profiles. So having multiple targets is always a benefit. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of where we're at with kind of pivoting next to kind of continue our momentum on this field.
One of the things that I try to promote with the Alzheimer's Association is they have a
Uh-huh.
program called Trial Match, where somebody,
Hmm.
let's say their spouse starts to develop and they say, well, obviously there's not a cure right now, but maybe our journey can lead us there. Is this something that at some point, Dr. Lukens, there is a human trials that could go on that that could accelerate or be the next step in this research?
Yeah, no, I definitely see it on the horizon. It's a really good target because a lot of the treatments that we have are either targeting amyloid beta or tau. And combining our work with another colleague in the field, Lee Gan, um, basically shows that this pathway is important both early on when amyloid beta is only there, and then really late in disease when tau starts to emerge. So that's a benefit in the sense that it could be more productive for a larger spectrum of patients.
Okay.
So yeah, it definitely is something to look at, and I definitely want to thank the Alzheimer's Association. They were the first group to provide our lab with funding
Oh,
to study
okay.
Alzheimer's, and this project was supported by them,
Oh,
and it's
good on
been
them.
yeah, it's been really fun to get to know the local chapter, and they come for lab tours and interact with the trainees, and they do a nice piece every year on women in science with our group. It's motivating for us to have that interaction with them and share the passion. We kind of synergize and build off each other in terms of wanting to work together to find a cure for this.
Well, and having a research facility like the University of Virginia, I know that you and I have spoken in the past about research that becomes a force multiplier. The university, the medical center is very committed to making sure that you guys have everything that you need to come up with these moments when it's, hey, we have just made a leap forward. And I don't know if it helps, the endowment grow or anything like that, but it is certainly notable when you have universities like UVA, but also like Duke, Stanford, these places
Yeah.
that are committed to not just treating disease, but researching how to do it better.
Yeah. Yeah. And something, just one quick plug for something that's on the horizon that I think people in this area and those who love UVA should feel a lot of pride and optimism around is the the Manning Institute that's being built at Fontaine. And so our lab's going to be there and a number of others. And the thought is that, we could accelerate the advancements of these discoveries by pairing us with, chemists and nanotechnologists and clinicians, and also having some, feeder groups being out there, some small businesses, and working together in a more interdisciplinary kind of setting, with structural biologists to identify the best, pockets of sting to hit. And I think, I think that's going to be huge, both for the patients and the area in terms of providing, job opportunities and opportunities to interact, in the community, and educate on advancements made in science.
Well, I appreciate everything you've done. So this Sting molecule is a good guy that is doing a bad thing
Yep.
for the right reason, it sounds like. And
Uh-huh.
that makes it hard to, you can't just go and get rid of it, because otherwise other bad things that happen.
Yeah, yeah. So it is one of the players that help protect against viruses. Not all viruses. So like, it's important in the context of flu, but obviously, and SARS-CoV-2. But if you're vaccinated against those, you shouldn't really need, or you shouldn't need a fully optimal sting pathway. So,
Pardon me for
you know,
being the guy in the conversation, but is there anyone looking at, this outbreak of SARS-CoV-2 and this, or was the Sting molecule already a culprit in the development of Alzheimer's before 2019?
Yeah, it was. I mean, we were working on this. We're starting to put together proposals based on this idea before SARS-CoV-2,
Okay.
for
Okay.
sure.
So
But
you know what, people hear it and then they start thinking crazy things. So not crazy
yeah,
sometimes, because
yeah,
the crazy idea is what leads you to the place where you are, Dr. Lukens. So we
yeah,
appreciate it here on this end of the spectrum, and we appreciate the breakthroughs that you keep bringing for us. You mentioned this working together. Any other tidbits we should be watching for from the neurosciences department?
yeah. No, I think it's exciting time. Over the last, I think, 4 or 5 years, our department's actually grown, like almost doubled. So I think there's, it's, and university wide, there's been a large investment in bringing in new people and technology.
You know what?
And
And actually, I'm playing
Mhm.
Detective Columbo here, and there's a
Yeah,
guy who
yeah,
probably could have used some therapy. And I forgot to ask you, but artificial intelligence, how has
yeah.
ability to sort through all of the data from all of over the world helped you guys move forward faster? I presume.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, the most day-to-day impact that it's had on us is, so we're doing a ton of big data analysis. So we're basically, doing RNA-seq, where, single each cell we're taking out and asking like what's the full repertoire of things that they're expressing.
Wow.
And it's this is an emerging technology that's super new. So you're not always going to have the local expertise on all matters, but if you have an error in your code that you're using to basically break that data down and make
Mhm.
sense of it, oh man, it could save days in terms of finding the error in the code, based upon communal input from investigators at Harvard and Stanford and across the world.
Yeah.
So that's been huge in terms of data analysis, and I see that as being like one of the biggest benefits of AI in terms of our work.
Sure.
So
Well, and it was even to the point where a guy who has no clinical expertise is able to think, well, gee, that might help. Dr. Lukens, where can people read more about? Is it just virginia.edu, or where could people
yeah,
read more about
yeah.
this breakthrough?
Yeah, so also we have a lab website if you want to learn, come and learn some of our other projects and some of the amazing trainees that are doing the work. And then so that's www.lukens, so my last name, lab.com.
Okay.
And then I'm we're also on Twitter, and we try to do our best in terms of, putting out, cutting edge research that happens, maybe a story a day, but it's usually our colleagues in the field. So I don't know my Twitter handle.
That's all
Oh,
right. I don't know mine either. I don't think I had to change it
yeah,
about a year ago for
yeah,
reasons we won't go into now. But Dr. Lukens, thank
yeah.
you so much for the breakthrough, but also thank you for joining us and spending some of your time with us. I'm sure Dr. Gupta is on the phone ready to interview you. Um, but I'm
He
going.
was here. He was here a number of years ago. He came to see Focus Ultrasound.
Oh, okay.
Um,
I'm teasing
yeah.
you just because
Oh,
I
I
I
know, I
I,
know.
I want to see this as a big story because I
Yeah,
think this is becoming so prevalent. But thank you so much, sir, and you have a wonderful day, and thank you for joining us.
yeah. My pleasure. Great to talk to you again.
Subscribe to get the news the legacy media won't tell you and only the Daily Signal can bring to you.